Welcome to the Awe and Wonder podcast. Season 5 is talking about vision as it relates to AAC and AT. I'm Sarah Kinsella.
And I'm Brenda Del Monte.
And today we're joined by Lynn Elko. And Lynn and her daughter Emma struggled to find a way for Emma, who has CVI, to have access to robust vocabulary. And together, working through page setup, navigation methods, and symbol representation, they figured out what worked for Emma and called it See CVI, Speak AAC. Collaborating with Penn State communication science disorders researchers, they co-authored a paper published in the AJSLP, which provides a framework for CVI and AAC considerations. Lynn, nice to have you here today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so
much for having me. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a little about yourself? Tell us about Emma.
I'd love to. She's my favorite topic. Emma was born, we had a typical pregnancy. Delivery was really quite easy. She was born with a new cord around her neck. And I did have an allergic reaction at around week 12. So when she came out, she didn't make any sounds. She had a hard time, latching on and breastfeeding. And so we had some issues there. Her pediatrician was concerned about her head size at 2 days old, so really proactive.
Wow.
Sent us for PT eval at 3 months because she couldn't hold her head. Then we started with OT at 4 months. We saw our first neurologist at 8 months. He said she'd be on track when she was 2 years old. Our pediatrician wasn't sure, so he wanted us to get another opinion. And at 1 year old, she had an MRI, and we heard the term microcephaly for the first time, so small brain. And that was really how we got started. We started with early intervention when Emma was, I think, around 5 months old, because the hospital outpatient clinic providers were like, we think you're going to need a long-term solution for this, and we don't think that that's us. So we have been doing therapy for a really, really long time.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, if you ask her, I don't know if she'd feel about that. But we have been supported for a really, really long time. And we brought our first speech language pathologist on at 18 months because Emma was slow to develop any type of speech sounds. And so that's really what got us started. Emma, unlike a lot of kids with CVI, was diagnosed really early. She was diagnosed at the age of 4 in 2006. Crazy early.
Like, you could barely even find anything about that acronym back then. I mean, it's a big topic now, which is why we're talking about it. But man, back then there was not a lot around that.
You have got that right, sister. There was like nothing. I'm a keeper. Drives my husband crazy, but I have all the documentation across Emma's whole life.
Love it.
I even have the handout that we were given from the ophthalmologist, and it said red, yellow, shiny things. We were never told that she was blind, though. We didn't even hear the term cortical blindness until a couple of years later when I saw it on one of her after summary visits, because the ophthalmologist had been going in and taking out the code for cortical blindness and putting in cortical visual impairment. So we never treated Emma as though she was blind, which is good and bad, because she was never not exposed to her visual world.
Mm-hmm.
And she also missed out on orientation mobility, extended core curriculum. So she had, no backloading of information to fill in the void for her visual loss. We were trying a lot of things. When we started not having success with the cards that the birth to 3 person was using, there were a variety of colors and sizes and shapes, and some were pictures and some were stick drawings and some were black and white. It was just kind of a mess of stuff. Emma wasn't having any luck. So I started taking pictures of her favorite things and made little rings of pictures that were just silhouetted. I like technology, so I didn't have a problem, doing this in Photoshop and making these cards. And these were actually proving really successful.
So if you're listening to the podcast, you may want to also watch the YouTube version of them, because Lynn's showing a lot of the resources that she's used over the years. And we appreciate that, Lynn. Thank you.
Sorry. So the visual description is a ring of laminated photo cards that are about 2 inches by 2 inches, and they're color with the label on the top. And then I started making bigger ones. So these are about 3 by 3, I think, with a color border. And because we thought purple was her favorite color, we didn't know that that was like a thing. But I just thought, well, I would want to look at things that are my favorite. And so I put the purple border on. And she started choosing these things, which was really cool. So then we asked for an AP eval at our children's hospital that we were going to, and Emma was 4, 5, 4, I guess. So this was actually before we had her CVI diagnosis. And they recommended a mini Mo with a 2 by 2 grid. But this was still 2006, and there wasn't a lot of technology being used anywhere around us, like anywhere.
Lynn, sorry to interrupt you, but how did you even know to ask for an AT eval?
Yeah, I worked in educational technology. In professional development. So we were making what I did for work at that point was delivering online learning we started in 1999.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I love technology. So I was trying different things. I was buying broken stuff on eBay and trying to solder them back together to bring them to life and doing all kinds of things. And finally I just realized that we should just get one, because school wasn't ready to do it. And school still wasn't ready to do it. So we asked Patan, our state lending library, for a super Augie, if anybody remembers what that is.
I don't know that one.
RJ Cooper had it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, right now we're going back in the archives.
Yeah, it registered, but I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, so it was based on a laptop, because I am not a speech language pathologist. I play one in my house, but I am not a speech language pathologist. And I don't know, I thought, I don't know how to do this device. It just looked a little more than foreign to me. So I thought, if I get a laptop-based system, then I can make the modifications and we can do that and see how it goes. And I would take responsibility for it. So that's what we did. But CVI, it didn't change the display to be as simple, because it really wasn't that modifiable back then.
Right.
So the display was too complex. We only had a loan. I think the loan is like 2 months. Is it still 2 months that they loan devices? That's not enough time for a kid with CVI to get over the novelty of a device. So it was a big failure. And it was pretty devastating, because I was like, Emma wasn't engaging with the things that were presented to her on her tabletop, because she had a lower field of vision loss. So she couldn't see what was directly below her on the tabletop. So that was, just a wash, like everything that was there. So we ended up buying a GoTalk 9 that had hard plastic cells, and she didn't have the ability to activate the cells. And it was 9, but I thought, oh, well, we'll get a 9 instead of a 4, because then we'll have room for growth. But complexity, so that didn't work. So then we bought a super talker, because we could change the array. And we had boards for 2 and 4 and 8. But again, she still couldn't activate the cells. So then we brought on switches to plug into the super talker. But then we lost the consistency of the array. I know I'm going like way deep here. Yeah.
When you had those 3-inch cards and you said she was making selections, was she looking at them or was she grabbing them?
So we had a great private speech language pathology who studied under Janice Light at Penn State.
Okay.
And she was doing things like this. So she was putting one card like more prominently in Emma's visual field, and then shaking it or moving it back and forth to elicit visual attention, and then bringing it back, and then bringing the other one up and labeling it, and then waiting, giving her time to respond. And Emma had a look away that we see, and we know now about kids with CVI. They have a look away when their functional vision is lower.
So describe what that is.
The look away? Sure. So this was a big thing in school. When Emma was presented with 2 items, and I shouldn't have a video and a cartoon, but anyway, she would look at what was being presented to her, visually engage with what was being presented, and then she would turn her head. So I'll leave one up.
Yeah.
And she would choose the one that she wanted. So she wasn't making direct eye to object contact with the thing that she was selecting. And this was another major challenge in preschool, and in elementary, because she wasn't giving direct eye to object contact. That selection wasn't being honored, which created a whole mess for Emma, because she was saying what she wanted,
Right.
but that wasn't being accepted or honored or respected.
People didn't think that she was actually making a choice because she wasn't looking at it.
Correct.
Although we know now that she was probably using her peripheral vision to actually be making those selections. But what it looks like to somebody who's not informed at all about CVI is disinterest.
Yes.
Looking away, like, I don't know if she wants either of these, right? So it can get interpreted the exact opposite, right? She's actually wanting that one. That's why her head's turned left. It's not directly on the item. So but the interpretation is, she doesn't care. She doesn't know what's going on, whatever, right? So I think if there's the interpretation is so detrimental.
Yes.
Because then none of her efforts were honored.
Correct. And that lasted for a long time. So with that happening over and over again, Emma decided, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. You're not listening to me. I'm trying to tell you what you want. There was actually one of the teachers in the adjacent classroom was an autistic room teacher. And she came in because they were struggling so hard to figure out what it was that why she was struggling. And she observed her for an hour, and there were like 90 mans she noted in 1 hour that Emma was trying to say things bodily with her, body-based communication.
Yeah.
She didn't have any other way, escaping from an activity that was too visually complex, putting her head down when, she couldn't engage visually. And so, there were FBAs that were done, functional behavior analysis done to try to figure out, what it was that was so horrible that she was acting out like this. And, now we can look back and we can say, all of this was CVI based. She was trying to self-preserve. And they called it her being a possum. She would put her head down. She would clear the desk because she just couldn't manage what was happening. And so that, that's really hard. And that carried through all the way till we had her first CVI range assessment at 15 and a half years old. That's when we finally learned about CVI and what we could do to support Emma.
At 15 and a half, is that what you said?
15 and a half. Yeah,
wow.
That's a lot. So we have had to unpack a whole lot of stuff that happened to her across her life to try to make learning even acceptable. I won't even say enjoyable, but something that she would accept to do,
She was kind of conditioned to not be believed, right? Yeah. Nobody's believing what I'm doing. So now, so peace out. I'm not going to do this anymore, which, that makes sense. None of us would continue to do the same thing and expect a different result. The other thing is that some of that head down stuff is like if you really want me to listen to you, I can't engage my eyes right now. And then that also gets interpreted as, like you're saying, a behavior or something, but actually this is what my body needs to do to even hear you right now, because my vision and my hearing are overwhelming when I'm trying to use them at the same time. Did you see that too?
Yes, that, and also, the visual fatigue, just being in an environment, an elementary school environment is really visually overwhelming. Sure. Nicole Dowell did her dissertation on that, and she published on, how just the typical elementary school classroom is just so overstimulating visually that even typical kids are struggling to manage that. And so you add on top of that CVI, and you can just, you can just forget. I have some pictures of Emma, standing at a, she was using a, posterior walk or anterior walk at that point? I don't recall, but she's standing at a schedule board, and they want her to put, the objects inside the schedule board, and she's just head down. Like, I just can't even look at that. Like, and that's perceived as she doesn't want to do it. She's not interested. She's not engageable,
Right.
So that's what the CVI looked like at school. What did it look like at home?
Well, we still struggled with a lot of things at home. We struggled with feeding and drinking. She drank out of a bottle. She was in the feeding clinic for 6 weeks, at around 5, because she low muscle tone everywhere, so it impacts all of her body.
Sure.
And that, helped her to learn how to use her mouth for chewing and swallowing, but it didn't help her learn how to find her spoon or identify a cup or any of that. And so all of that came at 15 and a half. She used a bottle, I think now looking back on it, because it was so identifiable in her space.
Sure.
That was the only thing that looked like that thing. She only stopped using a bottle when she was, I think, around 12 and a half. I think I had a picture of all the bottles laid out on the counter, and like, we finally are not using a bottle. And it came up in a memory, and I was like, oh my gosh, she was 12 and a half. And that was because, and we struggle with this at home, at school, they were giving her milk in a carton. So a carton's pretty identifiable as well. But she wouldn't drink it. She wouldn't drink out of a cup for us at home because it didn't look like a carton.
Oh.
So I tried really hard. I even went like on Etsy, and I'm like, does somebody sell a cup that looks like a carton? Have ceramic or something, just so that we can use this. So again, after we learned about CVI, then we started using a single cup with a rubber lid on it with a straw. And we use that same cup all the time. And now, she can use any cup. But I recall the first time that we were out, we were in a restaurant, and they had brought out those, those tall red Coca-Cola plastic cups.
Sure.
Red, in a sea of, other things. She reached out for one of our friends' red cups to drink out of it. And I was like, she just saw that cup, and she knows that that's a cup, and she knows that that's something that you drink out of. And I was like, so excited.
Feeding is a big deal at home. What did entertainment look like? Did she ever watch TV? Did she attend to things? Did she like music better? Like, did you struggle finding toys that she enjoyed? Like, what did play look like?
Play is really hard.
Yeah.
Play is so hard because she doesn't have that instant learning to see what other people are doing, because she didn't have that distance viewing to understand that, oh, that's what play looks like. And after we learned about CVI, and I've heard Dr. Roman speak a lot about the child with the visual impairment, the world doesn't exist beyond their reach. Like, beyond their hands, their world doesn't exist because they can't make sense of it. And that goes for CVI too, if you don't have developed that distance learning. And because of the latency she experienced, like, games, very scary. Dogs, horrifying. Still to this day, she is terrified by dogs.
Very unpredictable.
Yes. We just went to get her haircut, and the stylist had three of her dogs there, and it was disaster for us. Like, she almost sat down on the steps. I'm like, no, you can't sit down on the steps. We gotta keep going. But so there's a lot of things that are really hard there. Even ADL stuff like dressing. We finally figured this out just this year, putting iron on like cricket vinyl sports because it's stretchy on her pants at like 2 and 10 o'clock on her waistband, yellow anchors, so that she knows where to put her hands, because it's hard to figure out. So now with those yellow anchors, she can pick up her pants and pull up her pants and On the same thing on the back of her shirt, we put it on the underside. We flip the rim, like the ridge of the shirt over, and she can grab it, and she can get herself dressed. She can feed herself,
Great
with
idea.
a spoon. She's learned how to work a fork. Still very messy.
So
He does have motor challenges, but yeah.
yeah, well, you said you play an SLP at home. I think you also play an OT.
Yeah,
And
that's what I was
probably
just gonna
many
say.
other roles, right?
Lots parents, right? We have to
Yeah.
kind of fill in all the gaps, but
Yeah.
So tell me, is Emma your only child?
she is. We are blessed with our golden egg. My husband had a cancer, and we didn't know if we could have children, so we're
Okay.
really fortunate that we have her.
So what were her opportunities for peer interaction?
Really, really tough, because social engagement is so hard for kids with CVI.
Sure.
Right? The face is so challenging. And facial expressions are so fleeting that they come and they go before the child has a chance to
Register.
yeah. So she had one friend in elementary school, a young boy who I didn't realize he actually truly had befriended Emma until we got an invitation for his birthday party. In elementary school, everybody has to send in a birthday invitation. Nobody really ever, I don't think, meant it. But I guess his mom had asked Emma's teacher, was Emma coming to the party? And I was like, really? He really wants her to come? He said, oh, he planned the whole party so that Emma could come.
Oh,
I know. We still have this picture in her bedroom. And I was like, what? So she went, and it was hard. It was still hard. It was bowling, but it was an activity that she could participate in. And it was probably her only real friendship that she had developed at that point. And then, things they went to different schools, and that had, fallen to the wayside. But now that she is older and she has better vision, better use of her vision, it has been interesting. We have transitioned into the adult world, which is a whole nother wax and rather scary for families to do. But we feel really fortunate that we found what's called a community participation support program, which is a one-on-one program where Emma gets to go out into the community, and she has reconnected with some people that she has gone to school with. And they recognized her, and we're happy to see her, because we had moved to different schools trying to find a way for Emma to have access to learning opportunities. So that's really sweet. And now, she enjoys relationships. Not the way that you and I do, because it's, she uses a talker. She is a person with a visual impairment who has experienced not a lot of reciprocal engagement. So, that social exchange, we're still working on developing that. And that's one of our therapy goals right now. One of our speech language goals is, that multi-part exchange. And she's getting better at it. But she's still really interested in herself. So we're trying to get her interested in other people.
How old is she now?
She is 22 as of this month.
Oh,
Really?
so well, I would love to hear about what changed when you got the CVI diagnosis, when Emma had the CVI diagnosis, including her communication story. I know that's a big piece of what.
Sure. Do you mean her diagnosis, or when we began to understand CVI?
When you began to understand.
When you got the range, right? Is that when you began to understand, is when you had the range? Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the range.
So the CVI range assessment was developed by Dr. Christine Roman Lancey. It was actually her dissertation back in the 90s, her dissertation study. And then it turned into a more formalized assessment, which was published in her 2007 book, which by that time we had been diagnosed in 2006. So by the time we had gone through all the ocular therapies and decided this is not working, we decided, okay, there's nothing we can do about CVI, because that's what we had been told. But her book was first published in with the range assessment then, and then it was revised in 2019. But we actually, our first contact with anything regarding CVI, because we had been trying for a super long time to find a communication system for Emma, was by getting a POD book.
Okay.
and went to multiple pod trainings, brought our school SLP to a pod training. This was our pod book.
Oh yeah.
And we started with 12 up, and then the navigation buttons, and then the page buttons, not buttons, but you know what I mean, tabs. And we were modeling this for 18 months by the time we met Dr. Roman. And I presented Emma at a 5-day advanced course because we weren't making any progress. She would regard the book, but she would not engage with the book.
So the pod book is pragmatic, organized, dynamic display, which is a robust communication system that is light text, so it's paper based, right?
Yes.
And you have high contrast symbols that are Velcroed on. Is that what I'm seeing?
So they weren't initially. They were at first just a regular pod book with flip pages. But then when we went for our first assessment with Dr. Roman, she said, I think that display is just too much. And, we had invested 18 months modeling this and carrying this book everywhere and doing everything. So I thought, well, we're not giving it up. We have to dive into this. So I created a 3-strip pull off. So then we could take the pages that we already knew and pull off the symbol and put it on the 3, and the 3 didn't work. So then we did the 1 off, and pulled up the 1 up symbol. But Dr. Roman was concerned that there wasn't a lot of saliency with the icons that were used in the pod book. And she said, I just think it's just too difficult for her to visually discern the difference between all of the hands and the hand positions and all the bodies. And she said, I just think at where she is right now, the system is too visually challenging for her.
Did you try kind of partner assisted scanning with pod where you're saying it and she's nodding or she's indicating yes when she hears the one she wants?
We did not. So now you're not going to believe me, but Emma did not have a yes or a no.
Oh, I believe you. It's not targeted that much, and it's not targeted consistently.
And I couldn't believe that she didn't when I first heard that she needed one. Like when I went to our first pod training and, they're like, yes and no. And I'm like, Emma doesn't have a yes and no. She has a, I don't want it.
She has rejection.
And I want it. And that was what we had. And her I want it is her putting her hand forward and her waving her hand at you. And her I don't want it is clearing the table or pushing you away. But we never had a real yes or no. And I couldn't believe that something so basic was something that we had never established with her.
I think for anyone listening who is working with young students or kids that have CVI or just complex communication needs, hearing that right now, I'm sure you thought, oh my gosh, if I only had known this years ago, right? I'm sure there's a lot of things that come up like that. But if someone had said, hey, this yes, no is really going to be important in her life, I think that's really important for us, for you to tell today.
The other thing I say about yes, no is like, sometimes school teams or parents will be like, yeah, we've been trying to do it. We're like 6 weeks in and it's just like, it's not catching on. I'm like, I don't care if it takes 6 years. I mean, if 6 years from now you have a yes, no, then you've got some things to work towards. Because does she have a yes, no now?
So she does on her talker.
Yeah.
But okay, so I should maybe step back just a touch because I didn't realize that she had developed a yes. And it looked like this.
Hand on head and head down. Okay.
To herself. She was putting her own hand on her head. That's how, she was being taught, I guess.
Sure.
How to say yes. And she thought, I need to put my hand on my head in order to say yes. So she was doing it, and we just thought it was a movement.
Yeah, another kind of miscommunication piece.
Yeah, because we were never taught that that's what they were doing.
Right.
So that we could continue it at home, so I say that, and that's one of those backups. So at some point somebody was working on that with her. And that's what she took away from it. But it was never conveyed to us at home that was being done so that we could, partner. And I think
Yeah.
probably like if I had a neon sign over my head, it would say partner with us. With us.
Partner
Yeah.
with us.
With us,
Yeah.
because as parents, we are desperate
Yeah.
for this to happen. And you know, we wanted to, some of us are at the table, the IEP table, like pounding on the door to please
Yep.
let us in. Because we're fully invested.
Right.
Mhm.
So
And you want that training piece, right?
yes,
Um,
yes. And not only that, but what we learned, okay, so you asked, I'm gonna back up. You asked about CVI and what happened at that point.
mhm.
And I think that there's Emma would be a really cool longitudinal study, an N of one, yes, but regardless, because we have this really definitive line when interventions were started. And
Mhm.
so we can actually see the before and the after,
Mm.
which I just think is, horrible that we have that at age 15 and a half, really 16 when we were actually
Mm.
kind of up and running and had an idea of what we were doing, or some idea of what we were doing, but also really interesting because you can see the difference. I mean, we met Dr. Roman and everything changed. Um, and and another side caveat is that there are some adults who have CVI who never had the opportunity that Emma had at 15 and a half to learn how to use her vision,
Mm.
who are becoming pretty vocal in the CVI community. And I appreciate people's input because, especially as a parent of a non-speaking individual, I try to hear what people have to say because it gives me more insight into my daughter. But I think that people that are walkers and talkers who have CVI very likely have a different life experience than people who are, have mobility issues and who do not have spoken language because they can't share to the level that other people can. And they have a very different life experience when they're not able to ambulate and be autonomous in the world.
Right.
And we saw more of that also when Emma had bilateral leg reconstruction surgery in February 21 and then complications thereafter. And she's still not fully ambulatory yet. She has a power wheelchair now. And we got to see the difference in her person being stuck in bed or being pushed versus the person she is when she can drive her power wheelchair around.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
just another interesting
Mhm.
insight into how that ability or disability impacts the person's engagement in life.
Level of independence changes the engagement level.
Yes. And vision precedes action. So if you don't have the ability to see what's happening in your world or interpret what's happening in your world, then you can't act upon it. So kids who have mobility issues, who have CVI, aren't able to act upon things in their world to develop themselves more than kids who can. And then if they don't have spoken language on top of it, that's a lot for a person to be, I'm going to call it oppressed with or by, because I think that there are abilities in there, but they don't have an opportunity to exhibit them because they don't have a chance to do a lot of things.
They don't have a
Right.
chance. Yeah. You
Oh.
were talking about her pod book. So what was her CVI phase and what did her communication look like? Her communication system look like at that time?
Yeah. So when we met Dr. Roman, we tried doing the pull-offs and all of that. And then I just said, just stop. Like, let's just stop torturing her, because that's kind of what it felt like, and move forward with some more knowledge about how she uses her vision and how we can teach her to use her vision. So the first thing that we did was and it felt like I felt completely naked without the robust vocabulary. It was hard.
Mhm.
So what we started with was taking photographs. So this is a card. It's about 3 inches by 4.5 inches. It's printed on waterproof paper. And this particular image is a cup of applesauce because Emma used applesauce to help move food through her mouth.
Mhm.
So when she would get food stuck, she would need applesauce, so she could tell us she needed applesauce. And on the back of it is a thick magnet. I don't know if you can see, but it allowed her to get underneath the card and pull it off. So we took
And it's a black card with a image on it, so real very high contrast.
Yes. So we took photographs of known objects that were 3-dimensional to create these 2-dimensional images because we knew we would need to get into a communication system. And you had asked about play. Emma loves iPads. She loves backlit things.
Okay.
And those are the things, and light up balls she still loves these things. They're still her preferred things.
Okay.
And so we knew that we needed a backlit system. We actually tried an iPad 2 with Proloquo to Go along our way. And that didn't work. But we knew that backlit would be the way. So we started with the cards, and we used a big black magnetic board. So this is probably 11 by 20 inches.
Sure.
And then we would put one card at a time, and we would teach the card. And we chose to teach her words instead of icons or symbols for things that we couldn't find a good photographic representation. Because in working through all of this, I spent a lot of time talking to Dr. Roman about where should we invest our time. And literacy was something that was important to us and we really wanted to work on. So she said, if you're going to work on that, then it's not harder to learn a word than it is to learn a symbol.
Right.
And then you can use those words. My thought was everywhere. They're not just a symbol that we learn just in a system. So we intentionally taught words that were bubbled. The bubble word app didn't exist, so I had to draw all these lovely bubbles. And we would teach the word on the board, and then we used a choice board app to take these cards and put them in a digital app until we figured out what we were doing. And then when we figured out a little bit about what we were doing, I actually found the only speech language pathologist in the country who was CVI range endorsed at that time. Her name was Jen. And she got married in there, and we saw her for about 6 weeks, and I can't remember her maiden and married names, Jenna, just because it's in my system. And we did an assessment. We tried eye gaze just because I thought we're here. Let's do it all. Let's make sure we've crossed all of our T's and dotted our I's. And Emma couldn't figure out, why can't I just touch it? Because she was already teaching everything. She was a direct selector, with using her iPad and stuff like that. So we went straight to direct select, and we started off with just 2 images in a 3x2 grid. So 3 spaces across, 2 rows high. Or did we start by 2x2? 2x2, and then we went to 3x2. And then we ended up with, we settled on a 3x3 grid.
And what was do you know what her CVI range was around this time?
Yes, she was a 5.25, a 5++. So she was right in the middle of the CVI range.
Okay.
And that's what we started. And so we started plugging things into her talker. We started off with Snap plus Core first. We already had Proloquo, but whatever. That's what the speech language pathologist was using. So we got that. We started on an iPad Pro, so it was the largest visual display. And Emma moved so fast because we had been pre-teaching these words and 2D photographs for 5 months before we finally got to the point where we were ready to try to develop an AAC system. That she accomplished 6 months worth of goals in about 6 weeks.
Wow.
She was like lightning. And
did she need a key guard or anything else?
So we got a key guard. And we found out we really didn't need the key guard. So we bought one for Snap. She moved so fast in Snap that I thought, all right, people weren't believing her. So Snap didn't have a tap and hold. So I reprogrammed what we had in Proloquo to Go because you could add tap and hold. So I thought, well, I will let her show them that she knows what she's doing. And Emma has a fabulous way of telling me no. She just stopped using it. So I reprogrammed everything, cleaned it up, put it in Pro Loco to Go, got a new key guard for Pro Loco to Go, like in anticipation of moving over. And like this was all in like literally 6-8 weeks. And she was like, I'm not holding this button because it used to work when I touched it and now it doesn't work. So I'm not doing it. And this is how it went with us. I would do something and she would say, nope, that doesn't work for me. And I'd have to undo
We're
it.
changing my motor plan that was sufficient before. And if other people aren't going to believe me, that's not my problem.
Amen, sister. Preach it. Because that's exactly where we ended up. Like, you're just gonna have to believe her. You know, she has figured this out. Yeah, it was a challenge. We have experienced some challenges along the way, though. Dr. Roman has stayed in touch with us, and we actually got to work directly with her during COVID, which was really cool.
Wow.
Very nice.
But she would look at. So this is an older version. Oops, what did I just do? This is an
And by the
older
way, like listeners, now you can get an iPad Pro and it's still a 10-inch, but back then the Pro was the 12-inch. Like you can get different iPads in Pro version now, different sizes in Pro version, but back then there was like the iPad, the mini, and the Pro was a 12-inch. So when what she's showing, if you're listening, what she's showing is like a 12-inch or
yes. Yes. And so this is the original 12-inch, which is more of a landscape kind of format. It's more square now. But I don't know, where was I? I was in core words. So you can see this is not really pretty looking. You know, like the words aren't the same size. And this is what Dr. Roman got on me about. I don't mean to say it like that, but she said, you know, you really need to clean up the display. Sorry, you can see my dirty desk there.
So you have bubbled words and you have a few symbols, it looks like, and a few images too.
So we use the target symbol from Snap to get into all words, more words, because that's what we started with, so we kept it. And then we use the list symbol for our all words list. So we kept those two things, but everything else are pictures and words. And these are bubble words. And what I wanted to show you is that you can see that snack is bigger in its size than like dinner or breakfast. And this was one of the words, one of the things that Dr. Roman had talked about was we needed to do all these refinements, which I hated sharing it with her because I knew how much work she was going to make for me. But it made the system that much better. And so she wanted me to resize everything so that the letters were all the same height, so that not one word had greater visual
attraction
weight, than another. So like on would come on and be like a really big word. And then, you know, together is like the smaller word because
it's automatically setting it up to fit into the button size. So the shorter the word, the bigger the font is, it fills the button. And so you have to tell it a font size if you don't want it to fill the button.
These bubble words are images.
So
you resize all the images. And that was really tricky.
And Lynn, I wanted to let our listeners know that if they want to see the progression, it's on your website, right? You have.
Yes, I've tried to put things up there. Yeah, because I just get a lot of calls and emails, not calls because I don't give my phone number because I'm not that nice. Email that, you know, or
I don't know how we tracked you down, but yeah.
Through the website.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
The website is great.
Yes, on See CVI speakaac.com. And I developed that when I was sitting in a workshop, actually, because people were coming up and saying, you know, could I see that? And like, I was there for my own learning, and I don't mean to sound greedy, but like I wanted to talk to the people that were presenting, and I literally did it at a workshop so that I could put stuff up there so people could see it, and then just keep pointing people there. But you know, since then, we draw in from there's multiples of me from social media to go to the website so that people can see what we're doing in all areas of what we're doing with that. So Emma's system is it's really a combination of a handful of things. One of them is Joan Bruno's Gateway Teen Adult Functional Vocabulary. So this is my book. And I use this as a guide, and I have all of her categories all tabbed out because I really do come back to this often. I also use Emma's Pod book because I like the pragmatic structure of that, because we tried core words. We had worked with the pragmatic stuff with Pod, and that really seemed to work for Emma. But I knew that I wanted a robust system for her. So it was, how do we make it work out best for her? And this really has been all about developing a custom system for Emma. So it does meet all the tenets of a robust system because it has alphabetic access, it has a vocabulary access. I stopped counting at around 619 words because I thought that's good, suffices as being robust when she has access to that many words. And because it is built on a robust AAC app, we started with Snap Plus Core first, and then we moved over to Proloquo to Go. Both of those are robust systems. They have the opportunity to identify word kinds and then, change the word for it being plural or it being the verb tense. She has a 5x5 screen except for one spot, which is where we're working on scaffolding the skill, because she doesn't currently have this communication function yet, where she understands how to conjugate verbs. So we're scaffolding that into her system where we have I, and it's when she's eating like grapes, for example, because she loves grapes, she'll say, I want to eat a snack of grapes. And I'll say to her, no, Emma, actually, I am eating a snack of grapes, so that she can understand that, the words can change to reflect what's actually happening. Her system also has pre-stored messages for things that she'll say with frequency, like she has an expressions page that has like, that's awesome, or excuse me, or she also has another section in her talker which explicitly addresses her vision. So it's a button that says something's wrong. When you go into something is wrong, it talks about all different things that she can say to advocate for her own vision needs. Like, it's too much stuff, it's too noisy, be still, give me time, it's too far away, don't talk, I'm looking. So those are some of the pre-stored phrases that she has in her advocacy pages around her CVI. So it has the core, it has the fringe, it has alphabet pages. And so that was really important to us because we want her to build her ability to communicate, but we also wanted to meet her where she was, because she got her system when she was a teenager. And so she was in high school, and we didn't want her communication exchanges to sound very immature. So we intentionally added some of those small words to her system so that when she goes in, it says, I want to watch or to eat, so that when the sentence is expressed, it sounds more age appropriate to her. So we'll go back in and we'll be back filling those things in when she develops that communication function skill, that it makes sense to do that for her. And so then she'll have that grammatical structure too. But where she is right now, we intentionally built it to meet her needs to communicate at an age appropriate level with her peers. But now this is Emma's system currently. So it's, the bubble words are gone because she doesn't need them. And that's the thing, the intent in helping somebody improve their functional vision is that you can, lose the supports that they don't need anymore, so that you can work on supports in other ways, because they're always going to need support, because the visual world is very complex and demanding. But Emma knows her system now. So, this is the same target that you go in there.
Mhm.
We're in a 3x3 grid, but we still only use 5. This is the only exception, this main screen, where we have I, so that she can talk about watching and feeling about how she is, instead of just,
The font is actually quite a bit smaller, and but she's used to also the location of those words too, the motor plan piece.
Yeah, so the bubble words were crazy because I really couldn't control the font because they're an image. When Emma had not ophthalmology, optometry appointment, that assessment or evaluation, whatever it's called, that person said, she would probably do best with a 1-inch sized letter.
Okay.
And so that was a couple of years ago. She can access this display with these letters, but you're right. And so part of that is, again, keeping the same visual weight,
Mm-hmm.
working towards, like, if we have some big long words, the longest word on that screen, trying to make all the other words similarly sized. So that's the crux of CVI, is that I don't know that there will ever be an off-the-shelf system. We really need to look at each individual person. Our system uses swipe to get through the pages. So I don't know if you saw me doing that. So from like more words, which is where we go in, I can touch on want, and then we can go to the different things, activities, therapy, PT. She can go through a different activity in PT, and we're using swipe to get through to the different level of vocabulary. And what that allowed us to do was to really simplify the screen so that there aren't navigation keys and there's really low complexity with her screen. And that has been amazing. So she uses her vision first, and then she learns the motor pattern, right? So she knows how many pages to swipe up to get to a word.
Yeah.
And so we were down at Penn State working on another research project, and the team was watching Emma at swiping through, and Krista Wilkins is like, she's really fast. I'm like, she is really fast, because she knows how many swipes it is to get to a word. And then it also has auditory output. So it speaks the label for each button that she picks. So then she's getting confirmation. Yep, that's the one I wanted. And if not, she can back out.
I see.
We've built those different kind of supports
and-
into her system. And so it might not look to people, if they just see some screens on our Facebook page or on our website, that Emma's system is robust. But it is, and it has the opportunity to grow to be more robust as her needs develop and grow. So just to look at it, you might think, oh, there's really not a lot there. It doesn't look like it's a robust system. But unless you actually talked to us or saw the back end of it, or had an opportunity to actually see it in action, or see the opportunity for it to develop and grow more based on the app that it's in, you might not recognize that it actually is a robust system. So, so that's her system. And
what is her CVI range now?
That's a proud mom moment. Her CVI range score right now is a 9+.
Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah.
You know what? So I'm always encouraging families with young children and vision issues, like, hey, we know vision continues to improve through age 8 or so. And we're talking about just normal development, right? But
You're saying past that, Lynn?
I think it's really important for people to hear that from 15 to 22, she made that much gain in her functional vision.
Yes. Dr. Roman talks about if you employ specific, intentional, strategic adaptations and accommodations across environments throughout the child's day with fidelity and intentionality, you can improve a child's score 1 point a year. And that is what we saw.
Wow.
Which is huge. And I can be pretty dictator-like about it in making sure that we're putting those things into place.
Yeah.
Caveat
is required.
When Emma says she's done, she's done. So there's no forcing her. She's like, beat it, Mom, I'm done. And I respect that. Right. I oftentimes take her to that point, and I shouldn't. I should be more aware. I should be more considerate. But I get excited, that she's making progress. At 16, the school psychologist said she'll never learn how to read her name. Just forget that. You should just work on functional skills. And 8 weeks later, we did a home program. She had 14 words that she was positively identifying, and her name on the data sheet that I had, every time that we presented it to her, she knew her name when it was in an adaptive environment and her vision was supported so that she could access what she was seeing.
Mm.
That's huge, you know?
Yeah.
So I know that there are some concerns that people are forcing kids to use their vision, but I think that the kids will shut down when they can't anymore. And I think
Mhm.
that that's unfair that we take them there. I am guilty of that because
Mhm.
even though I try to be sensitive to it, it's an ongoing, it's like a rolling improvement. And it's you want to push just a little bit past where they are. Like
Yeah.
you to like for all of us, right? Even if we're working out, we want to
Yeah.
do our reps to the point that we're like, it hurts a little bit, right? Or we're never
Little
gonna have that.
scaffolding, right?
Yeah.
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 But we do have to be cognizant of, their well-being too. And so
Right.
that's always paramount first. But
Right.
Yeah.
So, Lynn, I assume that you speak with other parents, families of who have kids that with CVI, and what do you tell them about what would you say when their child is just diagnosed with CVI? What are some
First steps.
yes, thank you.
I think the very first step is getting a CVI range assessment score. Because if you don't know where the child is, you won't know how to prepare the materials. You won't know how to present the materials. Um, you have to do an assessment to know where to start. I mean, I think that's just you guys would, I think agree because that's your world, right? Data. We
Yeah.
have to know where we
Mhm.
are. And that's one thing I love about the CVI range score or the CVI range assessment is it does give you a score. So if you aren't seeing progress, then you need to change something, right? And
Mhm.
that's what data is beautiful for. It lets us know if we're moving in the right direction or not.
So find a TVI who can help you
So
get
I
that.
would say a knowledgeable professional because they're not all TVIs. There
Okay.
are OTs that are, CVI range endorsed.
Mhm.
There are PTs, there are O&Ms, there are speech language pathologists. There are all different kinds of people in all different types of roles who have now come to learn by choice about CVI. And
Yeah.
you just need to make sure that they are a CVI knowledgeable person because without that strong knowledge base, you won't make progress because I have talked to a lot of families. I mean, we had a TVI. Emma had a TVI from the time she was 4.
Okay.
Okay. So that's it. It's the more knowledgeable piece than the letters behind the name. It's like, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
know that even in SLP, right? So SLP is the letter behind your name, but you don't know anything about AAC. That doesn't mean you're not going to
Yeah.
get a speech pathologist. It just means this isn't your thing. So you
Right.
can be in sort of this world, but not know enough about CVI to move a child forward.
Right. I mean, you could be a low vision specialist. You could be a Braille specialist.
Sure.
Those people don't necessarily know about CVI.
Right.
And CVI people might not know about Braille. I mean, they do because CVI training requires you to go through a Braille course and doesn't require you to go through a CVI course. But yeah. So I think finding that knowledgeable professional is the most important
First
part.
step.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would also say to develop a preference sheet or list
Mm-hmm.
because your child best, and that child is most likely in your home is their safe and known environment where they're going to perform most optimally because that's their natural environment. So make a list of what it is that your child can do and how they can do it at home and how they do it and with what they do it and put that in a document because I think professionals get tired of us parents talking to you guys a lot about all the things. But if we put it down in a document and we share it with you, either in a Google Drive or, wherever,
Mhm.
then everybody on the team can access it and see how it's done. So one of the things for Emma is language that we use. So at first we thought maybe she had central auditory processing disorder because she didn't always respond the same way or, efficiently when she was told or asked to do something. And then I realized that it was perhaps the language that was being used, the rate at which the language was being used. And so when I realized that, like when we were trying to teach her yes and no in her talker, I realized that if I prompted her with a sentence of, do you like this? do you want to go? Do you have to? Do you need? Then she would go to her questions page and give us a yes or no. But if I use the wanna or can you or something like that, that wasn't registering with her. So when I suggested to everybody, if you want a yes or no answer, ask her in this manner. And, after we got that squared away, then we could expand out and say, oh, or can you go? Or do you know? So then we could bridge out of there. But we first had to solidify what it was. Language and the rate at which we speak. Like Dr. or Mr. Rogers spoke at so many words a minute.
Right.
And I that pace can really be helpful. I'm a fast talker, and that doesn't always help Emma. So sometimes I have to slow myself down so that she has a better chance to, understand everything that I'm saying.
Right. Everything you've said today, though, it drives home a few major points. And one is checking your assumptions, right? And what are you assuming? The other is, what am I observing and what do I still not know? Like, those observation skills. What's one variable that I can change so I can learn more? And using all the critical thinking skills. There is no checklist here that's going to get Emma from her starting point to where she is now. It's not like just do this list and then you'll have your system and it'll look like that. It doesn't work that way. You're saying, ask these questions, change these variables, see what you learn, and the only constants change. So when you think she's ready, take the bubbles off, right? Like, you're still always moving language forward. You're still always moving vision forward. And that requires that constant assessment, not testing, not constant testing of Emma, constant assessment of what am I observing? I really, really appreciate the way that you talk about your journey, the way you honor her stages, the way you stayed curious and you still are about what next steps are. And I think that is why she's made the gains. I know the professionals have helped you and you've been wide open to that and you've been seeking all of them out, but your diligence in moving it forward and staying and saying, what I noticed is this, what I noticed is that, right? Is so critical to the whole thing.
Yes. Literally we have to follow the kids' lead because it will lead us if we will pay attention to where it is that they want to go. Yeah. And for Emma, I think we can oftentimes disregard the nonverbal communication. And when our kids are at the early stages of AAC, that is their communication.
Yeah.
I've got to pay attention to that. But she loves her talker and it is her talker and you don't take it from her. I have my own because, but we take it everywhere. We have a copy for when we're skiing. We have a copy in the shower, so that we always have one.
Yeah. So Lynn, we will post a link to the article that I mentioned when I first introduced you. That you've been involved in some research. You and Emma, I'll say Emma, yeah. And are there any other resources that you wanted to share?
Yeah, so I will actually send you guys a PDF, which has a whole bunch of scholarly research on AAC and vision and access. And then a couple of other websites as well that you can access for information. And then I would just say stay tuned because we have some more research projects in the works. Emma has been involved in them. I know, I'm so excited. I'm on the IRB on one of them. So like as a guest contributor, so that's exciting for me. And the framework that we developed in the article, the first one on evidence-based AAC for CVI, that framework is really, Brenda, what you're talking about. It's a series of questions and it walks you through how to make a custom system for an individual with CVI. Always questions, because there is no plug it in and run, because you have got to customize. So we're going to be testing the framework. So that's exciting. And then also other stuff, but you can hear about that at ASHA next.
Okay. There you go. We'll share all those resources and we really appreciate you sharing your story. Like Brenda said, it's been wonderful hearing about Emma and just how well she's doing and her story of her path with CVI.
Thanks for having me. It was absolutely an honor. Thank you.
Thank you
we
so
really
much.
appreciate it. So fun. Thanks.
The contents of this podcast were developed under contract with the Washington Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, U.S. Department of Education, and administered by Central Washington University. However, those contents did not necessarily represent the policy of the OSPI and CWU, and you should not assume endorsement by the federal and state government.